Andrew Lewis, Jenelle's first baby daddy, is one of the most mysterious people from the Teen Mom franchise. He pretty much completely disappeared after Jace was born, but now some bizarre details about him have been exposed, and you guys will never believe what really happened to Andrew. You almost never hear about Jenelle Evans' first baby daddy anymore. After her 16 and pregnant episode, Andrew took off to supposedly pursue his modeling career, but what he actually ended up doing with his life is absolutely insane. Listen closely, because the truth about Andrew is almost impossible to believe. After Andrew left Jenelle and their newborn son in 2009, he had almost zero involvement in their lives. He claimed that he was going to move to China to be a fashion model, but what really happened is somehow even crazier. Andrew actually moved to New York, where he said he was modeling. Allegedly, he started seeing a woman named Cindy Brecker, and the two might have even been married for a brief period of time. But before they called it quits, Andrew was in for a serious shock. Only 1 month after Jace celebrated his first birthday, Andrew's second son Jacob was born, and not long after that, everything in Andrew's world came crashing down. Sadly, but not surprisingly, he wasn't around for a second son either. Just a few months after Jacob was born, Andrew was back in North Carolina, but it wasn't to be involved with Jace, unfortunately. Andrew was actually arrested in December 2010. He had an outstanding warrant for almost a year earlier for failing to pay Jace's child support, and because of how overdue the payments were, Andrew was in over his head. After finally paying over $2,000 and spending nearly 3 weeks behind bars, Andrew was released. But instead of staying close to Jace, he went back to New York again, and what he did next was seriously unexpected. Despite not having been a present father at all, Andrew decided to tell everyone how much his son meant to him. With the help of one of his friends, he recorded a strangely vague dedication to Jace in a form of a rap song. I feel like actually visiting either of his sons would have been a better move, but the next time Andrew had any kind of interaction with Jenelle and Jace was totally mind-boggling. In 2012, Andrew contacted Jenelle out of the blue. He mentioned that he wanted to catch up on child support again and be in his son's life, but the very next conversation between them brought about a completely different story. After Jenelle revealed she wanted to have a paternity test done, Andrew admitted that he didn't think he was Jace's real father. That made it honestly seem like he had only been trying to be involved for a truly ridiculous reason. Andrew supposedly hadn't made any recent child support payments, so maybe he wanted to smooth things over with Jenelle and Barbara. Either way, I feel like his sudden interest in being a part of Jace's life just seemed way too coincidental. Andrew had moved from New York to Florida but still hadn't made any effort to be around before that phone call. And when he finally saw Jace for the first time in over 2 years, his reaction was insanely unsettling. When Jenelle, Barbara, and Jace decided to video call Andrew about the paternity results, I couldn't believe what happened. Immediately after the call connected, Andrew started going off about how he knew for a fact that he wasn't Jace's dad, and in my opinion, he was way too happy about the possibility. Andrew was so convinced that he wasn't Jace's father that he started talking about the changes he needed to make right away. He wanted to get his name removed from the birth certificate, and he was tired of being on the hook for child support. But that still wasn't even the craziest part. Andrew was looking right at Jace over the screen while saying that they looked nothing alike. He actually said that he wanted to close that chapter of his life and move on, like he had even been participating in the first place. And this was all before he knew the paternity test result. Once it was proven that Andrew actually was Jace's father, he suddenly stopped contacting Jenelle again. Despite making a ton of empty promises about how he was going to be there for Jace, he clearly didn't want to be in the picture. That's why I was absolutely stunned by what he did next. This is seriously outrageous. Andrew came out of the woodwork again a few months later to do a very heated interview with Radar Online. Believe it or not, he actually claimed that Jenelle and Barbara were preventing him from being a father to Jace, and you'll never guess what his excuse was this time. Andrew explained that he hadn't been getting any pictures of Jace, and he took that as a sign to stay away, but he was also apparently unhappy with something else, and it's so crazy. Jenelle had been battling her substance dependency on Teen Mom, which Andrew must have been keeping up with somehow. In his interview, he slammed her parenting skills and called her names because of her struggles with substances, but just a few months earlier, he had admitted to something that's unbelievably ironic. Andrew had opened up to Dr. Drew Pinsky about his own issues with substances in a reunion special. He also lied about why he hadn't been an active father and put all of the blame on Jenelle in a remarkably weird way. Astonishingly, Andrew felt like Jenelle was keeping him away by not reaching out to him repeatedly, and his excuse for not making the time to be there anyway was incredibly bizarre. Andrew claimed that he'd been too busy to be around because he was feeding the homeless and volunteering in hospitals. Needless to say, both of those were complete lies. What he was really doing with his time was actually pretty disturbing. Allegedly, Andrew had been going to college in Florida to get a degree in directing or production, but according to what a source told Radar Online, he was making trips to North Carolina for an alarming reason. Andrew had reportedly tried at least 4 times to sneak into Jace's daycare despite not having custody of him. Thankfully, he ended up being banned from the childcare center altogether. I honestly can't even wrap my head around how messed up that is. The insider revealed that both Jenelle and Barbara had offered many times to arrange visits between Andrew and Jace. I don't get why he constantly refused just to secretly try to see Jace behind behind their back. Andrew always seemed to be worried about paying child support, but not enough to actually do something about it. I really don't see how he managed to avoid more jail time because of how much he owed. This is so insane. Andrew allegedly owed around $12,000 at the time for his child support debt. Maybe that also explains what happened not long after. You're never going to believe the next crazy twist in his life. Out of nowhere, Andrew went silent again. Not only had he failed to try to visit Jace when he had the chance, but he also basically disappeared from the public eye again for years. Shockingly, Andrew stayed out of the spotlight for 5 years, but then he made another unexpected MTV appearance. At this time, his behavior was even more unpredictable than before. In 2019, Andrew reportedly reached out to a Teen Mom producer in an attempt to set up a visit with Jace. I guess contacting Jenelle or Barbara wasn't part of his plan for some weird reason. But did he seriously think he could totally avoid his son's mother and legal guardian? But that wasn't even the strangest part of Andrew's return. Unsurprisingly, Andrew going through a third party just made Jenelle and Barbara even more suspicious of his sobriety and true intentions. But once the MTV cameras were rolling, we finally got some insight into what his life was actually like in New York. Andrew was seemingly super excited about the possibility of getting to know Jace. He even talked about tearing the city up and going out on the town with his then 9-year-old son, but that's not all. Andrew acknowledged that he had missed out on so much with Jace, but sadly, there was already a clear indication that he wasn't planning to change very much. This is honestly unreal. Andrew claimed that his lack of involvement in Jace's life was still somehow Jenelle's fault. I can't believe that he's never taken accountability for being such an absent dad, but that's not all I found surprising about the situation. I was honestly blown away when Barbara agreed to arrange a meeting with Andrew in New York. She understandably wanted to see if he had actually quit using substances before she allowed him to visit Jace, but what happened next was absolutely wild. Barbara arrived in New York only to realize that Andrew had stood her up. Despite having scheduled the meeting, Andrew was visiting his family in Florida instead. I can't believe he didn't cancel or make different arrangements. This strange situation was apparently the last time that Andrew tried to actually be involved. Ever since then, he's almost totally fallen off the map. He hasn't followed through with his plans to be an active father for either of his now teenage sons, and honestly, I can't say that I'm surprised. But what do you guys think? Do you think his intentions were genuine the few times he tried to be involved with Jace? What are your thoughts on everything that happened to Andrew over the years? Let me know in the comments below.